What's going on, everybody? Andrew here, back for our build review show. It is Friday, December 13th of 2024, and on this show, I bring users builds up live on stream, giving them personalized feedback and advice about things that I think they can do differently in their builds to help improve their post-contest sim ROIs and ultimately build and submit stronger lineups into their contests. So we do this show twice a week, typically on Mondays and Fridays. We do this show at 5 p.m. Eastern, following our 4 p.m. Eastern office hours show. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We have 4 people signed up for the show today, so should be a good one here. Excited to jump in and start reviewing some lineups. So first up today is going to be Spizzo, and we are going to be reviewing their NBA lineups from Wednesday, 12/11 here. So let's go over to the contest tab, see what they got going on. And looks like they played 3 contests. These are all good contests to play, right? $4.20 max, $1.20 max, entering less than the maximum into the 50-cent mini max, probably being bankroll conscious. This is great, right? If I had to make any recommendation here, I would say start to mix in some of the lower dollar single entry 3 max contests, like the $1 single entry. I think there's a $1 3 max. This, $5 single entry, $12 single entry as you scale up a little bit. Try and get a little bit more of a mix, right? We typically recommend 25 to 50% of your nightly allocation going to single entries and 3 maxes, 50 to 75% of that amount going to 20 max and 150 max. So just mix that in a little bit as you continue to play here, but nothing bad. All right, so let's review. Let's go with the minimax most entries that you had here. This would be a fine contest for us to review. And we will let this load, jump over to users. All right. So Spiz actually won this contest, which is fine. There's still plenty to learn here from this. So what I would say is always set the entries equal greater than or equal to the number of entries you entered, which is 110. We're going to sort by sim ROI. All right. So what do we see, right? So first thing, it's awesome that you won. It's great. Sim ROI wise, right? If we were to play this contest out 100,000 times, the builder says that the set of lineups that you submitted aren't the best, right? Negative 27% sim ROI. So it's nice that we landed on a time here where you won, right? Like even, we talked about this negative sim ROI lineups, they still win, right? Negative sim ROI portfolios still win. There's some amount of winning baked in there. Now, if you played it out enough times, that's where things get interesting, right? So we're using this long-term, this large sample size to tell us if our lineups are strong over the long run. All right, so what do we see? First thing that stands out to me, salary's a little bit lower than some of these others, right? 49.4, we see is what you play. We see 49.7, 49.8. Players, even though it's a 2-game slate, not afraid to use a lot of salary. Okay. Your average dupes look good here, right? 1 average dupe. A lot of the other sets have higher average dupes, 5, 7, in the 10 to 20 range. I'm almost finding it a little interesting that somehow you have 1 average dupe and everyone else is so much higher, right? It seems like that low average dupe is coming from your low sim average score, right? So sim average score is 243. A lot of these other sets are in the 252 to 259 range, somewhere in there. So what's happening here, right? Spiz is basically sacrificing projected points to get to more unique lineups. Now, what happened, right? In my opinion, it seems like they went a little bit too far. Seems like they just were a little over aggressive with whatever they did to get to a lower average dupes, right? So that's the biggest takeaway for me here. And just a quick note, right? Looks like the lineup that Spiz did play, that one was positive 33% sim ROI. So that's good, right? And this looks like to be a little bit higher than their average projection, right? This one was like 246.8 compared to like the 243. So this was a strong lineup, right? So nice to see a nice strong lineup take down the contest here. Notice max salary here was 50,000 and it was only duped one time. So a lot of good things going on here. We're seeing good, we're seeing bad. So we're going to try and find a nice balance here to figure out what we can do in the future. So why don't we go into a build where these lineups probably came from? Looks like they came from build 1. Looks like there was a late swap. Great to see Spiz late swapping here on a 2-game slate, letting those morning games or letting that first game play out and then taking that, using the live data, late swapping onto, lineups based off of how that first game played out. But we're going to start in build 1 here. And what do we see? So I think this is probably part of it. I'm almost positive the minimum salary is like 44,000 by default. It seems like they lowered it to 30,000. I probably wouldn't do that. NBA is like a projection heavy sport. And what we saw, right, is that people are still playing like 49.7, 49.8 salary lineups, a lot of them and grading out really well, right? And then even your winning lineup was 50,000 salary with one dupe, right? So I wouldn't be afraid to play high salary lineups based off of what we're seeing here. So I would, if anything, be more inclined to raise minimum salary than lower it. So if you want to move it from 44,000, move it up, not down. Be my first takeaway here, right? All right. No filters, no rules, no lineup filters. We see unique rank. We see one min unique. Okay. So far, so good. All right. Jumping into the player table. Sorting by exposures. So really hands-on build, right? We see some adjustments to projections. We don't see a ton. There's like 4 total, which is fine, right? It's okay to be opinionated here, and it's okay to work those in to your sets of lineups, right? So this is all fine. I don't have a problem with any of this. We see 4. If I had to guess, maybe like 20 min or max exposures here. So very hands-on build, right? Now, the only thing I would probably say is my assumption here is that all of these adjustments are what led to the lower sim average score. The builder is basically having to meet all of these. So it's probably having to go further and further down in the pool to get to lineups that match these requirements, right? So, in my opinion, the question isn't should you do this or should you not? The question is, how often are you right? And what I would do is write all of these down, right? It's like, okay, hey, the guys that, and I would probably do this a little. How would I do this? So some of these don't look bad, right? Like Brunson, right? Like, okay, hey, you're basically saying you want to play him at his ownership, which is like the most neutral thing you could do, right? So like, remember, matching ownership is you're taking a stand in a negative direction or in a positive direction, right? So I don't mind like, hey, I'm matching on Brunson. Hey, I'm matching on Towns. I'm matching on Eason, right? Where it gets interesting is somebody like Josh Hart, right? Where you're like 2x the field. This was a good call. Like a really good game. Eason's close. Trae Young, close. Jalen Johnson, close. I would take note of like how the builder interacts here. Right. So like typically when you go a little bit below the ownership, you're more likely to come in closer to it like you said, Brunson to ownership. But instead of being 38, he goes all the way to 54 because the builder is trying to get the best possible lineups plus meet your exposure so it can go over. So you kind of see that a lot, right? Even Towns, you have at 40, he comes in at 51. So if you want to match ownership, I would probably set the max exposure like 5 to 10% low, and you can play around with it and kind of see where it comes in. But consider that, right? For players you're just trying to be even on, try and go like 5 to 10% less. Another thing I would consider is I would keep these in mind. Like, even if you wrote these down like on the side, right? And you're like, hey, these are the exposures I want. You write them down on a list, you put them in an Excel sheet, whatever you want to do. And then try using the min unique tool, right? And see how close it gets by itself, right? Like, okay, hey, instead of min unique of 1, what if I use 2? What if I use 3? How close to my exposures am I getting? Because the chances are you're going to get closer by using this tool, right? The higher it goes, the more players you're going to have in your player pool, the more spread out your exposures are going to be. Typically, you're going from like a more leveraged set to a more and more neutral set of lineups as uniques go up. So I would recommend starting with uniques. And then typically what you might end up with is you might end up in a situation where you go from using 20 max exposures and minimum exposures to maybe using like 5 total, right? So you're letting the builder get there a little bit more organically to 80% of the adjustments you want to make. And then you're coming in and making some manual tweaks to like the last 20% to get those guys close. So that's probably where I would start. And typically doing that is going to help you to get to better lineups, using the min unique tool, adjusting exposures more organically. Keep an eye on this average projection as you continue to, increase the min uniques. Watch how much projection you're sacrificing. I recommend adding an ROI one too, right? Come in and add average target ROI. And then you have this data point as well. So these will help you out. And then you could even use an ROI greater than 0 lineup filter. So you do that, you're just protecting yourself from playing negative ROI lineups by setting that floor ROI, by using this aggregate metric, by using this average projection aggregate metric to see the impact your changes are having and go from there. So if I were to make any recommendations, I would make those 3 right there. ROI greater than 0 lineup filter, set up the average projection, average ROI, aggregate metrics, use uniques before exposures, and then after you're done using the uniques, then go in and make those final fine-tune adjustments with exposures. So give that a shot. Don't lower the minimum salary would probably be another one that I would throw in here, and let me know how it goes. The other thing, right, which I'm just noticing right now, always build the max number of lineups. You're only built 1,000. Looks like you're on ultimate here, so you can build up to 5,000. Always build the max number of lineups. The reason for that is because the builder does not build your best lineup first. We are randomly sampling the sims, building them all. We put them into the pool, and then they run through the contest sim engine afterwards. So in theory, your best lineup could be built last. So don't be afraid to build more than the amount of lineups that you need. Always build the maximum, in my opinion. All right. Good stuff there. Hope that helps you out. And we are going to keep it rolling. Next person up is going to be Brandon. And we're going to be looking at NHL from Wednesday as well. All right. Let me get Brandon up on the screen. Looks like we had a 2-game NHL main slate on Wednesday. Spiz said, thank you. You're welcome, man. Congrats on the win. All right. Jumping over the contest tab, and let's get SaberSim up. 2 contests. Dime time quarter. These are great contests to play. Love that. We're going to start with the quarter jukebox. And we'll let this load. Jump over to users. All right. B. Clegg is our guy. 20 entries. Sort by sim ROI. All right. So first things first, right? Negative 90% ROI day probably feels really, really bad. But good news, right? There's some good, strong underlying metrics to say that your lineups are not as bad as you might think they are, right? First off, it's going to be this sim ROI. Positive 17%, right? Looks like the highest sim ROIs are somewhere around 20%. So like you're right on the cusp of it, right? You're right on the cusp of really strong lineups in this contest. I would say your lineups are good, right? And we want to figure out what we can do to make them great. So first things first, good start here. What else do we see? 0 average dupes, 14 out of 20 uniques. Kind of interesting. It was a 2-game slate, so there's going to be a little bit of duplication there. Last, most notable thing for me, right? 87 sim average score. Even on a 2-game slate, a lot of these other top users, I see 95, 97, 96, 92, 95, 96, higher sim average scores. There is always obviously a range, right? You don't need to have the highest projected set. Like you could have 92 and still grade out really well, or you could have 97, right? There's this like 5-point kind of band that we're seeing here, but you're kind of outside the band, right? You're even 5 points beyond the 92. So I would say if we could play like a little bit higher projected lineups, that would probably be beneficial here. So let's go into the build and see what happened. I think not late swapping on this slate is fine. These games are 30 minutes apart, probably not a lot going on in between. We see lineups were built 5 minutes prior to the game starting. So nice, probably I would imagine like a nice lean process here. All right. So what do we see? So minimum salary at 0, leaving the minimum salary at the default. I don't know what that is. Let's just open up a build and find out. 44,000 would probably be my first recommendation here. Salary and projection are like typically correlated. And I think it's just nice to have a safe, salary floor that could lead to higher projected lineups. Because in like a correlation heavy sport like NHL, the builder's probably a little bit more inclined to play lower salary lineups on like a 2-game slate. So I would probably leave the floor salary just for safekeeping, based on what we've seen so far in contest flashback. So that's the first thing I would do. No filters, no rules, no lineup filters. No min or max skater exposures. Nothing in the individual positions. Nothing in team stacks. Nothing in game stacks. So pretty hands-off build. I mean, that's probably the only way you can do it in like 5 minutes anyways. One thing that stands out to me, right? And I don't know how impactful this was or not. This could potentially be impactful, right? So kind of similar advice as the last one. I would, this max, median, min is like fine if you want to use those. The two that I recommend are the two that we were just talking about: average projection, average ROI. These two make a lot of sense to me personally. So, having these, and then basically you're adjusting your min uniques and you're watching how these change and you're watching how these change. And, if you adjust it from 3 to 4 and you see your projection drop by 5 points, chances are like maybe you're a little far there, right? And like maybe you want to walk that back. We can just like do a demo. So let's go into the saved. Let's clear those out because these are the ones you ended up using. And then let's go back to my lineups. So at min unique of 1, we're at 84.9, 111 ROI. And then at min unique of 4, oh, interesting. Projection went up a little bit, and then ROI went down. So that's kind of expected. I think on these like smaller slates, the builder is more inclined to basically like kind of flip the slate on its head and like play the lowest projected skaters because like they have the lowest ownership and they get there enough of the time across 100,000 slate sample size where they're good. Using mini uniques can help you get to a little bit more projected lineups. Might have to sacrifice some ROI to do so, but it's ultimately okay here. So just keep that in mind as you're making changes here and doing stuff like that. But for me, biggest things that I would do, leave the minimum salary or even possibly increase it. Put these two aggregate metrics and then pay attention to how they change as you adjust your uniques. Give those a try. Your lineups were positive 17% ROI, right? I just gave you like two super small adjustments to make because you're right on the cusp of having like really good lineups. So I know it didn't work out. I know it feels bad, but your lineups are probably a lot better than you think. Make a couple small fine-tune adjustments, see what direction those take you in, and kind of go from there. But this isn't like something where we need to like overhaul your entire process. We just need to make a couple small fine-tune adjustments, and hopefully those have a good impact on your lineups. All right. Another good review there. Keeping it rolling. Looks like we have two people for Thursday night football. So we've hit NBA, we've hit NHL, and then now we're going over to the NFL streets. So kind of a fun build review show, jumping all over the place. All right, so let's go to Thursday, NFL. Rams and the Niners. It was quite the low-scoring affair last night. Not a single touchdown, which is pretty crazy. All right, let's jump over the contest tab. And what do we see? So contest selection looks really good, right? All low stakes, jamming those low stakes, playing some single entries and 3 maxes, playing some 20 max and 150 maxes. Love what I'm seeing. Brandon said, thank you. You're welcome. So contest selection, really, really strong. Let's go and look at the mini max. Why not? Give this a second to load. All right, lineups are loaded. Let's go over to users. All right, 150 entries, sort by sim ROI. All right, so negative 4% sim ROI. I think we're moving in the right direction here because it's not our first time doing this one for Bodies by Dad. So continuing to just iterate, get better slowly here, and move closer and closer to positive ROI sets of lineups. So what do we see, right? 48.5 average salary. This is a little bit on the lower end here, but it's okay in a showdown type format. All right, negative 4% sim ROI, 13 average dupes, 21 unique, 61 under 5, 87.49 sim average score. So let's go find somebody with something similar, right? Closest I see is Garrido here, 13 average dupes. So same number of average dupes. What's different? Well, their uniques are a little bit lower, which isn't particularly a good thing. Under 5 is a little bit lower too, but they have about 2.5 more points projected across their set, right? So 90.06. So like for me, I'm looking at and our guy here, Bodies by Dad, is 87.49. So a little bit low. So we're getting closer, but we still need to make a couple adjustments here, right? So let's go into the build and let's look at this. Okay, so first thing I want to call out, right? There was a lot of uncertainty with the 49ers running back situation yesterday, right? Garendo didn't practice all week. We had him and Taylor 50-50 for most of the day. And then, it came out hey, Garendo is going to play full go. And projections probably got closer to something like 75-25 in favor of Garendo. These lineups were built 4.5 hours prior to lock. what I would do, I think it's okay to build your lineups at this time, but I would have definitely went into the NFL lineup alert channel in Discord and checked to see if additional sims had run that updated the projections. And I'm positive that did happen. So, I think on like Monday, sims ran early in the day and then nothing changed throughout like the entire day. So that made sense to me. Like, if you had built at this time and then never built again, that would make sense to me, right? So, for instance, like if I come into the Discord, right, and I go to the NFL lineup alert channel, and then we go to yesterday. It's all today. Okay, so right here, right? So Sims ran, earlier in the day. Like you would have built your lineups about right in here, right? Somewhere around this time frame. You might have caught this one sim here. But, you missed you missed some additional sims, right? So like there was one where Puka moved up, Taylor moved down, Taylor moved up, Taylor moved down, and then Taylor kind of settled in, right? And it seems like this last sim, like 4:15, like an hour to lock, you probably would have wanted to do your final build after that one, right? And then, this is like the next day. So come to this channel, every once in a while leading up to the game and just see if there isn't something where projections have like drastically changed, right? Because you want to be aware of this. You want to take this into account. So this is something that I would add here is that, part of the low sim average score, honestly, could be like, hey, maybe you got to more Patrick Taylor and his projection moved, 3 to 4 points. And if you had those additional 3 points, now you go from 87.4 to 90.4 and you're right where we're talking about you should be. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it here. Keep an eye on that. All right. What do we see? So we see 0 minimum salary, 49,000 max. So they lowered the max pretty significantly here. We see a rule, geo mean no more than 28. See a lineup filter, ROI less than 0. Hide lineups, ROI less than 0. That seems good. Okay, so nothing standing out to me as crazy, right? The max salary is a little aggressive. Maybe this is leading to a little bit lower projected lineups. I would probably consider bringing this up a little bit, maybe trying like 49.5 and seeing how that goes. If you want to do like 49.5, that might be a good change here. This rule doesn't look overly aggressive with the geo mean, 28, not like the most aggressive number, just based on my own experience here. So this seems fine. No min or max exposures in both captain or flex. Okay, so final takeaway. Rules, filters look good. I would slightly adjust my minimax exposures. If you want a lower minimum salary, it's okay. I use like a 40,000 one. I still recommend having a floor here. So if you want to copy me and use 40,000, if you want to take the minimum from 45,000 to 44,000, 42,000, 43,000, somewhere in that range, that's okay too. But I would leave it somewhere in like the low 40s. And then I would try and build closer to lock, or just keep an eye and make sure projections haven't moved too much since the last time you built. I think those 3 things are going to have an impact, and you're like right on the cusp of turning into a positive sim ROI here. So keep iterating, keep practicing, and I think you're going to get closer and closer here. So good luck this weekend in your contest. Let me know how they go. All right. One more to go here. One more for Thursday night football, which is always cool, right? It's when you have more than one user, we can always compare across users and see, how they compare against each other, and hopefully take some ideas from one another and apply them. So Next one up is going to be Junk Dog. And let's get him up on the screen. All right, let's go over the contests. All right, what do we see? Good contest selection, some single entries, some 3 maxes, low stakes, entering less than the max in the mini max, just trying to be bankroll conscious. It seems all good to me. So why don't we go into the same exact and we're just waiting for this to load. Boom, all set. Users. Okay, greater than or equal to 44 if you're entering less than the max. Columns look moved around. I'm going to reset them. Okay, filters on. Okay, cool. So what do we see? So we actually see another negative 4% sim ROI here, which is okay. Interesting to compare the metrics, right? Similar sim ROI, right? But this user has 40 average dupes with an 89.7 sim average score. So they took on more dupes. They got a little bit higher sim average score, but their sim average score isn't high enough for the amount of dupes that they're assuming, right? Closest person I see here at the top of the list, 42% ROI is Mr. XBWP with 43 average dupes and a 94 sim average score, right? So it's like, hey, you can play more dupes, but we gotta go way higher here, right? So about like 4 points projection difference from this user. You could go similar sim average score, right? 89, but in order to do that, you need to be closer to like maybe like 13 average dupes or something like that. So anyways, we're identifying stuff. We're trying to see what we could do differently here. Looks like these lineups came from build 2. Build 2 was built within like an hour to lock, so this is a good one. Happy to see that. We see max salary at 49.8 here. I like this a little bit better, right? Than going all the way down to 49,000. I think that's just like a little too aggressive. So 49.8 seems good. Another geomean aggregate rule. Which one's this at? 24 and like a half seems fine. To be honest, I'm kind of surprised to see 40 average dupes with the geomean rule, with the max salary. It's getting tough out here, man. All right. What else do we see? See autofill. Ranked by prize pool. It looks good. Unique rank, target ROI. All that seems good. No min or max exposures in both the captain and the flex. All right. So where do you go from here, right? You're like, dude, I'm accounting for duplication with max salary. I'm accounting for it with geomean. I'm still being duplicated. Like, what do I do? Right. I got a couple things for you. So number one, it's going to be a little bit more of a game theory thing, right? Which is going to be running a build and just running a cash build, right? So what you want to do is open up a build, go to your gear icon, switch build mode to optimizer, make your minimum required 2 adjustments. Trying to figure out what are the most common stack lineup constructions, right? You just want to look at all 20 lineups here. Hold on. Okay, 20 lineups. And I'm mostly just trying to look at some trends here, right? All right. Most popular captains, Purdy and Puka. Okay. I like to come into this flex and like see what some popular pay down options might be, right? Like maybe like Colby Parkinson. So I'm just making some notes, right? I'm like, okay, hey, Purdy / Puka captain, Parkinson, flex. Okay. What about stack exposures? Seeing more 4-2s and 3-3s, right? A lot of like even stacks, 4-2 Niners, 3-3 stacks are like popular. So kind of like it's going to be a close game, right? And you can kind of tell by like the spread, right? Spread's like 2.5 here. So we're like, okay, hey, a lot of people, playing this kind of evenly, right? Or even 4-2 49ers or 3-3s. Okay, these are my notes. All right, great. Well, aside from Geomean, aside from salary, one way you can try and get different is with lineup construction, right? So like, hey, I run my build, I get my lineups. Well, I'm going to come in here and see like, hey, what are the most common or how often are the non-most common stacks coming up, right? We see our 3-3s. Okay. We're getting to some of those. We see 4-2s coming up. And then what about, 5-1s, right? So it looks like you actually played some like 5-1s for the Rams here, right? I would probably just be trying to get to some 5-1s for both teams, right? Even if you want to go 2x the pool exposure and go a little bit high on both, if you want to go into the four stacks and get to some Rams 4-2, which it looks like you did, kind of naturally here, that's great. But what you can try to do is try to play stacks that the field is not playing, where the lineup construction and the way you're playing the players are just going to be different from the way other players are playing them in an attempt to get to more unique lineups, right? So salary, ownership, but hey, what type of lineups, what type of game scripts are you saying are your lineups describing, right? What story are they telling? A lot of people are telling this cash story, right? Close game, players from both teams. Maybe you want to, be overweight on the onslaughts. Maybe you want to be overweight on the 4-2 underdog, right? There are other ways of getting unique in these contests, and this is one of them, right? So I would probably start to experiment with something like that in an attempt to further differentiate yourself from the field. So those would be my tips there. Again, seeing a lot of good things here, really, really close to being a positive sim ROI player. Try those things out. Let me know how they go, and appreciate you signing up. All right. With that said, it was our last person for the build review show today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Our next one will be on Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern, following the weekend here. If you guys ever want to get signed up, all you need to do, drop your DK username in the office hours channel. Let me know what sport and slate you want me to review, and I will add you to the list for the next show. So appreciate everybody. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.